Steve Davis has probably changed the game more than any other player, being the dominant force in the 80s and winning 6 world titles. So here's what we've learned from his technique, confidence and dedication to snooker and how it can help benefit you. This is Break from Life. Welcome back, and if it's your first time watching one of our videos, then it's fantastic to have you here. Back in the late 70s there was actually some money to be made playing snooker, but this wasn't very much. And that meant the top players of the day would supplement their careers by having near to full-time jobs. Even the most entertaining players like Alex Higgins would have to travel the country, playing in exhibitions and hustling for money just to make ends meet. And the problem was lack of exposure. Outside the clubs themselves, people had very little understanding of what snooker actually was. But mostly thanks to Alex's help, the sport was becoming more and more mainstream. And it wasn't long before the sport began to get a serious place on TV. And with a place on TV came serious TV money. All of a sudden, up and down the country, people were having snooker being beamed directly into their living rooms, and the demand for the game just grew and grew, even in places like Grimsby, where Obi Konkei is from. With the creation of Pot Black, players very quickly became household names, and this meant you could finally become a full-time snooker player. The conditions were now right that Steve had the chance to become the first player to make some serious money out of the game, and that was all down to his excellent technique. Steve never claimed to be a naturally gifted snooker player and would say that he got all of his ability to play the game from hard work and grafting. This meant meticulous attention to detail with the way he played each shot and making sure everything stayed consistent. And everything about his game would soon become the snooker technique, from the way he walked into the shot, to his stance, cue arm, bridge hand, and in particular the way he kept his head on the cue all the way through and after the shot. The introduction of the TV cameras resulted in a boom in snooker, with more people playing than ever before. And although these players would have wanted to play with the flair and charisma of someone like Alex Higgins, they're often referred to as the Steve Davis generation, partly because he was on top of the snookering world at the time, but also because they'd all adopted very similar techniques because they could clearly see how well it worked. Steve would line up the shot back from the table and walk in and stand on this line. The second foot is then placed a little bit in front with slightly more than a shoulder width stance. Steve can then keep his back very flat to the table. Interestingly, when he cues up to the cue ball, his arm is very slightly in front of a 90-degree angle, which is generally thought of as an ideal position. From the front you can see he has his cues squarely in the centre of his chin, with his bridge arm bent out about the width of his body and the elbow of his cue arm almost being perfectly parallel to the cue, tucking very fractionally into his body. He actually spreads the fingers of his bridge hand out very wide, presumably to get better balance, but this also means you can get your bridge hand lower to the table, which can help with backspin shots. On the shot, Steve uses some very deliberate feathers and a slight pause before delivering the cue, and is renowned for staying down on the shot long after the ball's been potted. It's also noticeable that he often uses what I'd describe as a compact backswing when playing some shots. Now this is actually quite a good idea, because if you're only going to play a shot slowly, there's no real need to pull your cue all the way back just to pot the ball at a slow speed, because if you have all that pull back and you just deviate off course a little bit back here, it's going to make a big change when you get to the cue ball, and also you're going to be playing the shot very slowly, you're going to be delivering the cue very slow. So what you can do is just pull your cue back the minimum amount and pot the ball. Now if you are going to try that, I'd highly suggest making sure you don't actually pull it back too short a distance, because if you're all of a sudden you're just pulling it back and it feels like a lot of effort to force the cue through very quickly, that won't help you at all. Make sure if you try this, you pull it back just far enough so you can pot it smoothly. But this wasn't enough for Steve, because he'd often get agitated when things weren't quite going his way, and this was still holding him back. Think of it like this: if I react to missing that pot in a way that suggests that isn't something I usually miss, then chances are people might not believe you. But if you react in a way that just sort of seems like, oh well, doesn't matter, then that's possibly more effective. Steve and his team managed to concoct a new unflappable ice-cool demeanour for him, where not only did they strike fear into opponents by getting him to come across as some sort of robotic potting machine that seemed to react emotionlessly to any situation, they also got him to sip water like some sort of psychopath. So after that, it wasn't long before Steve started to win everything, including the 1981 World Championships, where he impressively beat Jimmy White, Alex Higgins, Terry Griffiths, Cliff Thorburn and Doug Mountjoy, some of the biggest names in snooker at the time and for the next few years. His win in this event and his dominance in this and the following season meant that Steve was well on his way to securing his place as one of snooker's first superstars, and a lot of the success was to do with having a technique and an attitude to the game that worked well under pressure. Not that we're under pressure to pin the Con 47 from Bangkok, Thailand. In 1982, Steve compiled the first ever televised maximum break in his only professional 147 and won himself a Lada car as they were sponsoring the event. He later joked that if he missed the black, they'd have given him 2. What's noticeable about this break is just how nervous Steve seems to be all the way through it, and especially on the colours where he keeps running out of position. Despite this, however, he's able to keep potting the balls, and on this shot in particular, he doesn't risk going anywhere near the blue and the pink, and put all of his faith in his ability to cue in a long straight red. It's all about being able to play under pressure. These are shots I struggle to pot consistently, so it really does show how well Steve's technique holds up under pressure. To be able to play well under pressure, you've got to be able to separate the shot out into 2 parts. Back from the table, where you can easily line up the shot, and down on the shot, where you need to stay still and stay focused on how you've lined it up. Now, when you're under pressure, it can go wrong in 2 areas. To start off with, believe it or not, you might not even bother lining the shot up in the first place, which is a common reason for missing under pressure. And the second reason is when you're down on the shot, you start to doubt that you've lined it up right. And you really need to focus on how you've lined the shot up if you want to successfully pot it. Steve couldn't keep this form up forever though, and it meant he lost in the first round of the World Championships the same year, and Alex Higgins managed to take full advantage of this by winning his second world title. Soon after this though, Steve returned to being the dominant force in the game, winning the next 2 World Championships. But ironically, his most famous shot is probably missing this black in the final of the 1985 World Championships. This match literally enthralled the entirety of the United Kingdom and kept 18.5 million people up well after midnight to see Dennis Taylor win on the final black in the 35th frame. Steve actually points out that due to the enormity of the situation and the way that Dennis had come back, that shot is actually a lot harder than you'd think it is. So is it really that difficult? Not really, no. A lot of people look at this as the beginning of the end for Steve, especially as he was outplayed by Joe Johnson the following year. But they're obviously forgetting, and I'm not forgetting, Bravo Lima from Dhahran, Nepal, that Steve won 3 more world titles after this, and he was still the dominant force in the game until the early 90s. And it's easy to forget how popular Steve made snooker, even if he did make it popular by being the guy that everybody wanted to lose. Most shockingly of all, the man with no personality managed to become Sports Personality of the Year, and became enough of a pop culture icon to get the nickname Steve Interesting Davis. Steve played on this persona to great effect when doing public appearances and trick shots.
That wasn't a trick shot, it's just, I've always fancied doing it.
With this and his brilliant trick shots, Steve was able to become World Trick Shot Champion on several occasions. Steve's last significant victory was in the 1997 Masters final, where he faced Ronnie O'Sullivan, and this match had everything. Ronnie producing some of the most ridiculous snooker and ridiculous shots you'd ever seen, Steve trying everything to keep the scores respectable, and with the aid of the odd fluke or 2, managing just about to hang on in the game. The early introduction of a streaker, a 130 break from Steve, as well as some match-saving clearances, and in the end even Ronnie not being able to live with the pressure being put on him by the Nugget. If you want to watch an old snooker match, this is definitely an entertaining one to find. However, by now Steve was already on the way out, and someone else was well on their way to changing snooker forever. And this video shows you exactly how Stephen Hendry changed snooker forever, and this one shows you how Ronnie O'Sullivan changed snooker forever. And remember, don't just watch, play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.